how do you reverse drops? How do you train your staff to reverse drops? Now, that's a good question, right? So, like, it's not just you being able to reverse the drops yourself. And obviously, you're going to be a whole lot more motivated than your staff because it's your name on the line, it's your money on the line. But how do you train your staff to do that? How do you build in that motivation so that your staff now goes into an automatic mode of saving those drops? Well, first off, I think you need to bonus your staff for the net growth every month of your school. So whatever your goal is for that month, net growth, by the way, is adds minus the drops equals the net, right? So however many you're adding minus how many you're dropping that month, and then that's your net. So you bonus them on the net number, whatever that number is for you. So let's say it's 10. If you want a net growth of 10, that means if you've got 20 students, you can't drop any more than 10, right? Because then that leaves a net of 10. So I think bonusing them is a natural way to show them, like, hey, if you can save the drop, I'm thinking in their mind, like, if I can save the drop, then I can get closer to the bonus. And now they have a financial incentive to save that drop. And that's really, I think, at the end of the day, that's gonna be where you're gonna motivate them, right? Like, that's where they're gonna find their motivation. Now, because here's what drives me nuts, boils my blood. It's when they don't even try. You gotta at least try to save them. Well, it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean, like, if somebody calls in and just wants to drop, and your staff's like, okay, what's your name? What's your teacher's name? What day do you come in for lessons? Okay, great. Your last lesson's next week. And that's it. Like, why wouldn't you at least try? So if you can at least try to save them, then you're already ahead of the game. And that's a really sad statement to make, but it's true. If all your staff does is try, even without tools, even without, anything else, then you're already ahead of the game, because most staff don't even try. They just take the information. They're just information takers because they have no incentive, no motivation, and no tools to save the drop. It's true. It's why most retention in schools is not good. Like, it's why the drop rate numbers are just way too high, because people don't even try to save them when they're calling to drop, right? So, like, obviously they're trying to save them, through other means. But when it gets to the end and they're saying, okay, I want to drop, they don't even try to change their mind. So, okay, so that I'm belaboring that point. But once you find out the real reason, then you really have to become a problem solver. And that's where the conversation comes in of just like, well, hey, what's going on? What's going on? Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk. Tell me about your lessons. Tell me about your teacher. Like, what's going on? So then it's a conversation. All right. So that's the first thing. I would just say, look, talking to my staff, I would say, first, you got to try. Second, you need to ask some questions. And start off with some really innocent ones, right? Like, you're a problem solver, so you're going to try to find the real reason, but you really have to find it, because they're not going to give it to you. Usually, they don't give it to you right away. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. So, especially if you don't ask any questions. So you got to ask, like, what? So what's going on? How's it going? How are your lessons going? How is your teacher? So now that'll help you to find the actual answer. So practicing helps too. If you have an opportunity, with your staff, which you should take the time to, like, sit down with them and, like, practice. Hey, I'm the client. I'm calling in and I want to quit. So what kind of questions are you going to ask me? Let's try it. Here we go. Ring, ring, ring. So it matters, because the staff there. I mean, you don't just naturally do this stuff well. right? Because by its nature, it's a little bit of an adversarial conversation, or maybe not adversarial, maybe controversial. No, not controversial. It's a little bit like you're contradicting a little bit of what that person is wanting to do. They're wanting to quit, and you're asking them why. And so that doesn't always come naturally to people. And so you have to practice. You got to practice having the conversation and seeing what kind of questions you can ask and hearing them out. So talk about the reasoning so that they can really believe in getting parents to stay. Like the staff needs to really believe that it's best for students to stick around. If they don't really believe it and they're listening to the parents like give all the reasons why they got to quit and all this kind of stuff, it's like they're not going to be very convincing if they're not convinced themselves. So you have to do a little bit of salesman work on your staff. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Like how can you better convince your staff that your clients need to stay? Think about that for a second. Like as the owner, as the one in charge, how can you convince your staff? They're going to come at you with the exact same concern. Well, then what do I do if someone says they're too busy? What do I do if they're just not interested anymore? Like, how do I solve that? That's a good question. So so you have to really have some good conversations with them on selling them on why parents should stick around. What are the benefits of lessons? Maybe you have to sell your staff on that. So educating them a little bit. And then brainstorm. Brainstorm solutions that are beyond just what you can think of. Your staff probably has some good ideas too, but populate all of those things and put those down and even print them out and put them by the phone. So when somebody does call to drop, which they will, everyone, it's going to happen. They're ready. They've got some ideas. They've got some answers. They've got like the answer key, They're not going to save everybody. But even if they just try and they can save some, that's a lot better than none. And that's a really big step. That's a big step. And so you bonus them. That's how you motivate them. You bonus them. And then finding out the real reason, teaching them to actually investigate a little bit, have that investigative conversation, and then practice with them like how to have the conversation. And you may need to convince them. You may need to show them like, hey, this is why it's important for people to stick in lessons. Let me tell you, there's a real benefit here. We're not just blowing smoke. We're not just trying to sell. And then brainstorm with them. Come up with lots of different solutions that they can offer the client, the student, to stick around. And watch as your retention just gets better without you having to be the one to be on the phone to save those students.